Let's get one thing straight. This video is going to talk about how to read more, specifically how to read more history. But hustle bros suck and productivity content can be very toxic. You are not a machine, and trying to optimize your life is a great strategy to burn the heck out. I read a lot of history for work, yes, and for pleasure. I like the work and it makes me happy. Happy cycle, son. Not every second is a dream. Sometimes reading is like pulling teeth. Sometimes you just gotta knock it out to learn what you need to learn and write what you gotta write. But in general, we have fun around here. If you want to read more in general, make sure you also have fun. The first counterintuitive tip I would give is to make a conscious recognition of what the history you read generally is. The majority of all books published on history for public consumption and the best-selling books in the history genre probably come down to a few topics: World War II, Civil War history, biography. This trend also plays out in history YouTube. There's a lot of content on military history, such as generals and war tactics and play-by-plays of big guns go bang bang shooty shooty and great men go rah rah. I'm not saying this content doesn't have value, but it's an overrepresented part of the genre. So when you engage with history, I think it's important to recognize that the state of the genre is weighted heavily towards a small subset of history. And maybe that's a significant subset of history, but definitely it ain't 90% of history as a subject. It's also important to recognize that broad audience history content is weighted towards European history, which admittedly plays out on this channel too. There's a lot more writing and accessible stuff out there for these topics because historical injustices have focused on certain areas and stories more than others. See my history on the Haitian Revolution for a breakdown on historical silencing. So my tip here is to get beyond the standards of the genre. If you're interested in history and want to start reading about it, don't just pick up a book on Europe in World War II and battle movements. If that really interests you, maybe you played Rome Total War growing up, great for you. If that's how you want to engage with history, I'm not here to tell you that's bad, but I think you will be more well-rounded if you find ways to get out of that paradigm. Grab a book like this one on the Congo, written with a bottom-up perspective on history, not top-down. This particular book goes to great pains to write from the perspective of the colonized rather than, say, a henchman of the Belgian King Leopold, the colonizer. I think if you're just generally always trying to get different perspectives, angles, places, you're gonna have a more well-rounded view of things than if you simply go with what's popular at your chain bookstore nearby, or that one history book with the sword on the cover that always pops up in your Audible feed. If you just grab something off the stacks that has a lot of familiarity to it, maybe an orange or red cover about World War II or the Founding Fathers or a biography of a great man, these things have value, they sell well. I create content that fits into that genre too, so I'm not here to judge, but for your learning and betterment, get outside that bubble. That's a tip for me too. Sure. Read about ancient Roman history and Greek history, fascinating and well-trodden soil, but also read about ancient China or grab a book on the Incas or Haiti. Just get around, boy, be a little loose with your reading and break down some stereotypes. Break through that barrier. There's a whole wide world out there, and I would recommend you find it. Counterintuitive tip number 2, use AI to read more. Wow. Isn't that a fashionable zeitgeist tip from like 6 months ago? Seriously, I've done some testing here. Here's another way that I increase the amount that I read when it comes to paper books. This is a biography on Michael Collins by Tim Pat Coogan. It is a thick tome, and buying this book might have been a bit of a mistake. I generally don't enjoy biographies, even though I have plenty of them on my shelf. I have learned over time that they are a bit of a dearth of creativity and tend to fall into a cliche format. But this man in particular interests me. The Easter Rising interests me on the island of Ireland, and so I got the book. I broke. But there are challenges to reading this book. First, like I said, biography. Second, there's a lot of Vorkenntnis in German. There's a bit of foreknowledge that's needed in order to take in every single paragraph and really know what it's saying. And I find myself quite often reading a page of this biography and just zoning the heck out. I bought this months and months ago and have gotten a whopping 47 pages into the book. Now, a lot of people who advise on reading more and producing more, like being the most effective reader you can, this is the point where they say, toss the book out. If you're not enjoying it, toss it out, move on.
Damn books. No more books.
And I think that's good advice for someone who's casually reading, who's reading just to pursue their interests exclusively. They don't have any sort of higher goal. But in my case, not only am I interested in Michael Collins, but on a professional level and on a knowledge basis level, it makes sense for me to integrate this book into my brain, even if the actual page per page experience is a bit numbing. And so what I can do is open the Speechify app when I'm having a bit of trouble getting through pages, when I find myself zoning out. And what I can do is basically turn this book into a makeshift audiobook for just just a stretch to try to get a little further along in the process. So here it is. The Speechify app allows you to take photos of some pages and you choose the voice and it starts to read to you. And it can read quite quickly. I don't want to use an Audible credit that I could use on something different that I don't already have in my library. And so Speechify in this circumstance is a great way to just move along in your reading. Yeah, maybe I'm not going to take comprehensive notes on what I'm getting from each file because it's going so fast, but I can get the gist of it. I move along and this allows me to get through material I'm not super enjoying. And therefore it's a way of numbing yourself to pull teeth, to use a really ugly comparison. And really, no insult to Tim Pat Coogan, biography is just a rough genre. Here's another AI tip just to get cool with the Gen Zs. There's a lot of buzz about this thing called ChatGPT. I'm sure you already know what it is. Now, here's how I've tried to use ChatGPT. There's a GitHub prompt that can tell ChatGPT, pretend you're a historian and inform me. I've messed around with this sort of stuff and I find it to be kind of fun. It's kind of like an interactive Wikipedia. Wikipedia, of course, being the greatest work of intellectual altruism in human history. Learning with old GPT is a bit of a minefield when it comes to truthfulness. Now, okay, I know Wikipedia is also not the perfect source, but let's just say ChatGPT is even more problematic when it comes to verifiable information. So it's fun to experiment, but not really rely on that specific workflow. Here's how I like to use ChatGPT for a very specific use case, which is to give me suggestions on what to read. So rather than simply saying, hey, ChatGPT, teach me about X, where you're just going to get a wall of text and maybe it'll tell you something good and maybe it'll cite some sources, but it tends to take some intuitive jumps. In my case, instead, what you can do is say, hey, I'm interested in, and here's a real use case I had. I'm interested in Viking astronavigation. Yeah, I just woke up in the middle of the night once and I thought I really need to make a video about how the Vikings navigated by the stars. Totally out of my wheelhouse, and to be totally frank, out of my general historical interests. So I went to ChatGPT. Hey, GPT, please tell me a little bit about Viking astronavigation. It told me some stuff, but what I wanted to do really is find some books and material that I could read and trust. So I said, hey, ChatGPT, can you recommend some academic historical books on this subject of astronavigation by the Vikings? And it gave me a list of books, a list of I think 5 or 6, and it gave me a little description of each, almost like you would get when you write a historiography or a literature review in the social sciences. So ChatGPT gave a little bit of a literature review, gives you a little bit of what to expect from the individual book, which is, of course, I can then look up the book and hopefully it's not just invented, it's real. Generally, in my experience, it has been. I got something to read. Thanks, AI. ChatGPT and Bing AI, I think you can think of it like a library research assistant desk. So just play around a little bit. Next counterintuitive tip, be less efficient to be more efficient. A little bit out of left field. So this tip starts as a tip that you already heard a million times before in productivity videos, which is to read while you're doing something else. So what that usually means is, hey, put on your audiobook while you're washing your dishes or you're out for a walk. That's a great tip. I use it all the time. In fact, sometimes I listen to history videos rather than read a history audiobook. For example, from my good friend, Dr. Cynical Historian Cypher, Dr. Joseph Cynical Historian Cypher. Cynical Historian is his channel. Sometimes I'll just listen to his videos while I'm out for a walk, or sometimes I'll listen to audiobooks while I'm out for a walk. The reading while multitasking tip is super legit. Let me give you a counterintuitive variation on this common tip. You should combine your reading, not audio, but paper book reading, with some sort of other valuable activity in your life that is not a multitask chore, but something that is actually enriching and relaxing to you. So in the original tip, it's listen and be productive while you're being productive. Productivity on top of productivity. Yay! But in this sub-tip from little William C. Fox, I'm giving the idea that you should be productive while you're being relaxed instead. Maybe you can have some positive associations with reading rather than negative associations. Let me give you an example that I would use. I tend to read in the evening as I'm winding down in the last hours before bed. I don't know if many people know this. I announced on Instagram and Twitter at William C. Fox, I rescued a rabbit unexpectedly 2 years ago, Josephine. Josephine needs time with me because rabbits are social in a similar way to cats and dogs. And Josephine particularly loves to get pets for long, long periods of time in the evening. And so what I will do is I will sit and I will read and I'll give her some pets. It allows me to do a couple things. One, it allows me to read more and allows me to relax at the same time. Like many people, I find hanging out with an animal companion that I'm bonded to quite relaxing. Second, because I have one hand holding a book and one hand petting a rabbit, there ain't no note-taking going on. My reading is less distracted. I'm not picking up other objects like my phone or a notebook to, I have an idea for a video. I'm going to put that in my little phone or on my notes, or I'm going to transfer this note into like a note-taking system or get it written down somewhere. Interruption is minimized. Sometimes you just want to get into a state of reading, a little flow where you're turning pages and getting into the rhythm of the writing. This is when I might do reading that is not purely historical, but still has value for the work that I do. A hypothetical example of this would be if I wanted to reread War and Peace by Tolstoy. Combining rereading War and Peace with relaxing with the animal companion, despite your first impression, might be a relaxing experience since the book doesn't require note-taking. Because of its unconscionably numerous characters, taking notes on War and Peace would just be a Sisyphean task anyway. When you're immersed in a book that's so well written like that, with its flowing writing style and super short chapters, it can be akin to a modern television series. So read things like this while doing something relaxing, like spending time with an animal companion or leaving your phone at home and visiting a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon to zone out with a book. Dedicate time to low stakes reading rather than constantly striving for efficiency. Don't pair productivity with productivity. Pair productivity with chillin'. You'll thank you. Although productivity gurus on the internet may insist that you need to be more productive and efficient at all time, it's essential to go easy on yourself, especially during the evening when your energy is low. If you push yourself too hard, you may end up watching soccer highlights and Star Trek reruns instead of reading. And I say this without any personal experience with those highly specific activities. Tip number whatever the hell. Allow for clutter in your life. Here's another anti-efficiency tip. Allow yourself to be a bit of a clutterbug when it comes to books. There's this trend right now to be a minimalist, to have every book on your Kindle, organize your home without much clutter, and avoid consumerism. That's good. We should be minimalists in certain aspects of our lives. For example, I started to build up a whiskey collection on my shelf, but I decided I don't want to have that relationship with alcohol where it's constantly present. So I've decided to embrace minimalism when it comes to alcohol and stop adding to that particular collection. Minimalism is also useful when organizing your kitchen or, choosing kitchen gadgets. Focus on the most important stuff like a food processor, a good chef's knife, a, nice skillet. However, I think when it comes to reading, there's space to be a bit of a clutterbug. I've told myself that when it comes to building up a library, if I think I want a book, I'll add it to my wish list or make a note of it for the next time I'm at a bookstore. That's all the friction I have. If I still want it at the next opportunity, I'll usually buy it. In practice, this can mean I have books scattered all around my apartment in various states of completion, and for me, this is a strategic allowance of clutter in my life. What's the worst thing that could happen? I've got too many books and it might be a hassle when I move. If you want to read more, it's the inverse of out of sight, out of mind. In your sight, in your mind. If you have a bunch of books lying around waiting to be read, the chances of you picking one up are higher. If you want to be a strategic maximalist with books, I say you have my endorsement. That's not to say you should go crazy, but having a couple of bookshelves in your home is fine. There's a Japanese word for owning books that you'll never read in your life. It's called tsundoku. And it definitely applies to me, but I get something from every book I own, even if I don't go through that book cover to cover. Sometimes being efficient is about being a little inefficient. I've learned that over the years, and this is a case where being a little inefficient actually creates some efficiency. By taking a scattered approach of reading and having books around, I'm creating opportunities to read at random moments. It ain't so bad. Time for a basic boy tip that's maybe more intuitive. Read audiobooks. That's it. Audiobooks are dope. That's the tip. Moving on. Another great way to read more history is to go to a university library. Your local library will have a history section, but university libraries often cater to the specific departments of the school. For example, I did my political communication master's at American University, a school with an excellent international relations program. If I were really interested in reading more about international relations, I would visit the AU library. I don't live close enough to the university to make it a regular thing anymore, but I enjoyed going to the AU history stacks and discovering niche books. Safety first for everyone. If you're not a student or an alumni, you might have trouble accessing university campuses nowadays. Things have changed in recent years, and you need to do your due diligence to ensure you are safe and not perceived as an intruder when visiting a university campus. So always figure out whether you're actually welcome before wandering onto a campus. Check a website, send an email. Respect, safety. We're all adults here. Do your best. Be nice. Let me contradict something I said earlier with my next counterintuitive tip. Read mass appeal popular history. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah. Here's another counterintuitive one, and one that contradicts something I already said. To read more history, read more pop history. Step away from encyclopedic style and super siloed academic writing. Hear me out. Academic writing should be a part of your reading. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but if you're simply looking to read more, consider looking at narrative historical writing. Let's just be honest, it's not just the history field. Academic writing in general can be quite formulaic, quite dry, and difficult to parse. Of course, it's most often written for other academics, not for the general public, and that can make it hard to get into. Let's say you download a paper or grab a professor's latest book. There's a chance that you're just not going to quite get it. This happens all the time. It's not something to feel bad about. Just because you really like history doesn't mean you're gonna, know every field and every niche within the historical political science profession. So what I would suggest is looking at books that are written by people who are storytellers, narrative nonfiction writers, often amateurs or journalists. Basically, start with pop history and go deeper from there. This tip runs risks. If you're not selective with your pop history, you'll end up in the basic boy military history industrial complex, learning only about battle tactics and big men. So read reviews and look for pop history that isn't so pop, it's poop. Examples for you. The Candy Bombers is a book that I enjoyed a few years back. Robert K. Massey's Catherine the Great. Actually a good, really fun biography. I just finished Massey's Dreadnought, and it's old school and problematic at times, but also really fun. The Last Days of the Incas by Kim McQuarrie. Historically sound and reads like a thriller. Awesome. These books and content with mass appeal are ways to get into subject areas and get the gist of what happened. You might find a narrative in these books that's not quite right, or maybe a little bit myopic or triumphalist. You might not find the academic rigor that would be required for you to participate in the discussion on a professional level, but you're likely going to at least get the facts of what occurred in an interesting way. It's going to be engaging, and if you're more engaged with the subject, then you can dive into some of the more in-depth, subtle reading on the matter, because you're going to be starting from a base of knowledge when you get into that weighty stuff. So my personal experience with this pop history to deep history funnel, I really love to read about the Haitian Revolution. When the French colony of Saint-Domingue experienced a slave uprising, a slave revolt in the 18th century, and even took on Napoleon, it led to the first Black Republic in the West. It's so fascinating, but also unbelievably complicated. I have a whole 30-minute video on the subject just explaining why I think it's interesting and trying to lay it out in a way that's not completely dizzying to understand. So check that out. When I first started reading about the Haitian Revolution, I started with pop history. I watched a PBS documentary based on a book by historian Dubois. I think the documentary was called Avengers of the New World, and then I read the book upon which the documentary was based, Avengers of the New World. I'm going to put the book on the screen in case I got the title wrong. I remember engaging with that book multiple times. That book is actually quite historically thorough, but it's also just an overview for the public. I was able to get into it, get the gist, and get my interest piqued. Then I was able to start building up a stack of books on Haiti, which is now quite hefty. Now I feel pretty engaged with things like the professional historiography surrounding Toussaint Louverture, leader of the de facto independent Haiti in the years between the revolts and Napoleon's rise to power in continental France. All that started with pop history. The journey I went on was to start with stuff for public consumption and then to go deeper. Don't start at the niche stuff and try to work your way up, because it's probably gonna not work. It's probably gonna bore the hell out of you. You're probably going to give up. So start with the easy stuff and go deeper. Watch a documentary about the French Revolution that's a little bit more academic, maybe from PBS. Then there's a book referenced in that documentary. There's an author being interviewed in the documentary, so you go there. Then you start engaging with that historian's historiography to figure out what they were reading to get to the point where they're writing a book on that subject, not the archival stuff, but other historians. You can see how the rabbit hole gets a little deeper and deeper by starting from the point of content that is pop history, and you work your way to the more substantive stuff. Related tip, dive into the bibliographies of books and articles you're reading. If there are suggested readings, or if a particular passage speaks to you and has a citation, take the time to look up the sources in the notes section. While this might interrupt the rhythm of reading, it can help you discover more material to explore. Related note, it's essential to let yourself go down rabbit holes when reading about topics that interest you. Following the thread of your curiosity can lead to deeper understanding and further engagement with the subject. For example, I recently became interested in the history of the philosophy of animal rights, animal liberation, and factory farming. This led me to read various books and works on the topic, from the Arab philosopher Al-Mari, who first expressed the idea of not commodifying animal products, to Peter Singer, Regan, de Grazia, Nussbaum. This book, Red Meat Republic, about the expansion of ranches into indigenous lands and the development of Chicago as an industrial meatpacking city. It's never ending in the best way, and I hope to share some of what I've learned in future content on this channel. To keep track of all the books and material you're interested in reading, create a Google Doc or Obsidian list or Notion note or whatever for different subject areas. You can dump book titles and other materials into these documents, so when you're ready to explore further or need more information, you have a list ready to go. By allowing yourself to go down these rabbit holes, you can gain deeper insights, increase your knowledge, and maintain your passion for the subjects that genuinely interest you. You start to see subject ecosystems, and that's freaking cool. Counterintuitive tip number something. Don't measure progress by pages, for the love of God. To read more, set yourself a goal related to time spent reading, not related to page count. If you set a goal like, I want to read 50 pages a day or 100 pages a day of history, hey, that's a great goal, but what is a page? I have this book on linen and it has a certain font size, and I've got this book on the Holy Roman Empire, and I'm currently reading a book on animal rights philosophy. A page is very different between these books. And Lord, if you're reading academic history, a page can be quite difficult to quantify because you'll also have wordy footnotes. And if you just have a random page count in mind, you might start skipping those footnotes because you just want to keep moving and maintain the rhythm, get to your goal. That's not the best dynamic to have. So personally, in my world, saying I want to read X chapters or X pages a day, a week, a month, it's just not as measurable as that number implies. What I would do instead is, if you're gonna set some sort of quantifiable goal, do it by time. Say, I want to read 30 minutes a day, or I want to read an hour. In my case, I set aside a couple hours a day for reading. I work a day job in the political communication space and in a foreign language. So for my private reading and writing, I set pretty modest goals like an hour or a couple hours a day reading. And let that time goal, whatever it is, be less structured in terms of medium. The time doesn't have to be with a paper book. It can be an audiobook on my commute, sitting down in the evening and reading a paper book, or reading Kindle in my bed. You can even open up the Kindle app on your cell phone if you're a monster. The point here is that if you're gonna set a quantifiable goal, make it time-based and go easy on yourself in terms of medium. Don't force yourself to read only on paper or in your special reading chair. Give yourself a break. If you're setting goals, empower yourself to actually meet those goals. Make them attainable. Be nice to yourself, dang it. And here's another sub tip. If you're not working towards something particular or trying to create a certain amount of writing based on your reading, consider habit building rather than setting time goals. Just say, I will read every day. That's it. For example, my buddy writes every day. That's his goal. Even if it's just one sentence, that one sentence of writing is fulfilling that promise to himself. And that might literally be all he writes in that day. He gives himself permission to close the tab and say, you know what? I said I'd write every day, and I wrote a sentence. Therefore, I'm fulfilling that promise to myself. It doesn't sound like much, but he's building a habit. And over the course of a month or a year, he's going to achieve more of his goals, even if he reaches them imperfectly. The hustle bros on the internet are lying to you. You're not going to be the most efficient person on the planet. I'm not the most efficient person on the planet, and it has taken me years to come to grips with the fact that the most efficient way for me, ironically, is to be less efficient sometimes. I go to the gym more when I set low attainable goals. I drink less alcohol when I don't outright forbid it. I read more when I'm less strict about it. I already said be nice to yourself, so now I add, give yourself some gosh darn grace. Life is pain, you beautiful dork. Just like, let off the gas sometimes. My imaginary producer is telling me to stop talking to myself. Since we're being emotional now, my last 2 tips fit that vein. First emotional tip, get some peers and go on the journey together. I feel like many of the hobbies I've chosen in life can be isolating, like content creation on YouTube. Despite having peers and other creators, in my experience, it can be quite lonesome. Reading and writing can also be lonely endeavors. And in our lonely society, why not seek some wholesome camaraderie? If your goal is reading, I think you should try to find a community around that. There are online subreddits and forums for reading and writing, but I think these are still too large. I'll be honest, I'm not part of a reading group, but I am part of a writing group. I think the lessons from my writing group can be applied to your reading goals. In my writing world, I have some in real life friends with whom I interact on a Discord channel called #TheLibrary. The library is our private space, just me and a few close friends from my hometown who share an interest in writing. They write mostly fiction, mystery, and various creative projects. A couple of the group members aren't even writing at all. They're pursuing painting or computer science courses, but the idea of the space is that we're all working on creative projects together in a small, supportive space. A couple times a year, we do a writing challenge, like writing 25,000 words in June or participating in National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, in November. It's a tiny, close-knit community where we are supportive and help each other. If you can find or start a small group for readers like yourself, It could be incredibly motivating. It could take the form of a book club with shared reading material, or it could be less rigid, simply a group for people who like to read, specifically history books. If you can create such a group with IRL friends or good online friends, I'm telling you, keep it small. I found this to be one of the most powerful, motivating tools. Sometimes in our library, we even join the Discord voice channel and just remain quiet, not even using the headphone function. Just the fact that we're all in the channel provides solidarity. It really makes a difference. So find your people, help other people find you. Read together, love, live. Let's crescendo and talk about the most important pillar, motivation. In many videos about reading more, motivation is usually the first topic discussed, but I wanted to save it. I'm not here to say that one motivation for reading more history or reading in general is better than others. What I will say is that if your pursuit is something like clout or wanting to be perceived as a person who reads a lot, especially history, that might not be the best long-term motivation. It's true that some people might be impressed by a large collection of history books, but the number of books you've actually read cover to cover might be quite different from what is perceived. I have no experience with this. While it's natural to enjoy looking smart, external validation alone probably won't sustain your reading habits in the long term. When you get into a dense history book and you're not sure what's going on, the idea that someone might be impressed by your reading choices won't be enough to help you turn the page. What will help you turn the page is genuine curiosity. This is the part in many videos where someone would give you a motivational speech about reading because you care, because you love the people and places, and because you have an affinity for knowledge. Plato's good for its own sake. Definitely never written like that in any of my videos before. Though I might express it with a touch of sarcasm, the underlying point is still valid. If you don't care, you're not going to read. In keeping with the idea of being a little looser with how you read and how you acquire books, make sure that at the core, your motivation goes beyond external validation. If you simply like history, that's totally valid. In my case, the parts of history that I engage with most are the places that I've fallen in love with, like Madrid, Washington, D.C., Berlin, Haiti. Whatever your motivation is, just make sure you have one. Passion will carry you through countless pages. And if you're following advice from this video, they'll also be countless, because you won't be counting them. I just shared my current reading list with my patrons and on my Discord. So if you want to get some inspiration from it and connect with me while supporting educational content on YouTube, become a patron. Later, y'all.